Hi, Brenda. It's good to
Hi,
see
Rita. You too.
One second. Okay. It's good to see you here. And I just have a question for you, actually, because my brother just sent me, one of the thing which is says is too much vitamin B12 hazardous for the health. Now we know that it does prevent the Alzheimer's disease, but to what extent? Because there was a study done in JAMA Network, and that was, I think, the Open Scientist was led by the Jose Flores Guerrero and the Stephen Becker in the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And they are saying that if there are no underlying causes, then you should not really take it. But everybody has underlying causes. They are not only dealing with one item. So it all depends upon how publics read this message. So what input do you have?
Well, there are not a lot of studies that have showed adverse outcomes from consuming vitamin B12 on a daily basis, even a reasonable amount, because you only absorb maybe 0.5 to 1% of what you consume if you're consuming over 500 micrograms. I mean, the only adverse outcomes that have really are very significant are some people who are taking large amounts on a daily basis do end up having some skin issues like acne, for example. And for those people, they might want to reduce the amount they're having and have smaller amounts, or you eat more of the fortified foods as opposed to the supplements. But generally, and I should say, Rita is a colleague, a very esteemed colleague, and it's really nice to have you with us, Rita. And it's nice to be able to say hi to you as well. But in my opinion, the potential adverse outcomes for vegans, especially who are not consuming sufficient B12, are far graver than any risks of taking a regular supplement. If you have skin issues, you might have to modify a bit. But generally, what we see in a number of studies that those that have low levels of B12 end up boosting their homocysteine. And homocysteine is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease, for birth defects, for cognitive impairment, for all of those things. And in order to keep homocysteine down, you need to be getting a reasonable amount of B12. And plant foods are not reliable sources. So we have to be taking it in one form or another, either from fortified foods or supplements. And so I would say it's not like vitamin D, where some individuals can't seem to normalize their vitamin D even at 2,000 or 3,000 IUs a day. They need to go to 4 or 5. But for B12, you do not need to be doing huge megadoses. Having a moderate intake on a daily basis is in my view, has been demonstrated over many decades to be a safe thing to do. And so for vegans, I think that is just, not something to worry about.
Brenda, thank you. And up next, we have patiently waiting Renee. Hi, Renee. If you'd go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. Thank you,
Hi,
Brenda. I have a question about EPA, DHA, and iron. I take Dr. Furman's supplement, as you had on your screen, for the EPA and DHA, and also I eat a lot of flax and chia walnut. And also for iron, I do all the things to enhance the absorption, but my levels are still not optimal for both of those. I'm wondering, are there some people that just don't absorb it due to genetic reasons, or is there something else I should be doing?
So I'm sorry, I just missed one little part. So for iron, your levels are low?
They're low. And I eat the iron-rich foods. I eat all the ways that you teach about, and do the things to optimize it, such as the vitamin C and those things too.
Okay. And then your EPA and DHA
they're in the mid-range. They're not, they're not optimal.
Okay. I mean, with iron, there are a number of things that you can do to try to increase iron a little bit more and intake. But if that doesn't work, then you may want to be doing a supplement, with like a multivite with iron, or or an iron like ferrin, you know, like a liquid iron supplement a couple times a week. There are lots of different things you can try, but in terms of diet, one of the things that can make a big difference is to, I'm not sure, I mean, I'd have to look at your intake at every meal and all of that, but one of the things that I do is when I cook my grains for breakfast, so if I'm cooking whatever grain, you know, oat groats or kamut berries or whatever, I actually cook them with very small lentils to boost the iron very significantly in the breakfast meal. Because iron is much more concentrated in lentils than it is in grains, for example. And so even when you're making grains to go with a Buddha bowl or something like that, if you cook in with the grains some lentils, you can get a boost of you know, quite a number of milligrams each day of you know, of iron. And then of course you're doing the making sure you've got a good source of vitamin C with that meal as well. You know, for small children, one of the things that I've suggested, and some people aren't too keen on it, but iron infant cereal is iron enriched, and for children that tend to be low, even older children, when you mix a little bit of infant cereal into, let's say you're making muffins or pancakes, into the batter, that boosts iron tremendously and can turn iron deficiency around. For children that are kind of sensitive to having the supplements, a lot of people are sensitive to iron supplements, so that's an issue for lots of people. But yeah, I mean, you just have to play around until you can get your levels. And again, you know, the levels, for example, of ferritin, it's all based on omnivores. And so vegans tend to have lower levels of serum ferritin. And this is not necessarily a bad thing if you're within a reasonably healthy range, because high levels of serum ferritin are associated with increased risk of a number of chronic diseases, because having a lot of free iron in the blood can end up acting as a pro-oxidant, especially in meat eaters that are eating a lot of heme iron. So just be aware of that if your hemoglobin and hematocrit are normal, don't worry about a slightly low serum ferritin. And then in terms of the EPA DHA, I mean, all you can do really is to do what you can to enhance the conversion of ALA and to take the EPA and DHA directly, which you're doing. And if your levels are still subpar, you may want to look at just taking a little bit more. And I've seen for people that are looking at, I mean, there's a lot of question about the accuracy of the current measurements for omega-3s. So that's, you know, we're still in early stages of developing those kinds of resources, or those kinds of tests. And so we don't know for sure they're absolutely accurate. But I've known people who you know, were taking 200 or 300 milligrams EPA and DHA a day who had to increase to somewhere 600 to 800 to get their levels in that range that they wanted to be. So that just takes a little bit of, you know, playing around with it.